Hey, my name is Kleiko, and I help people with existential struggles. And I found this old Reddit post from r/existentialism that I wrote 7 years ago. And I thought it would be interesting to revisit this and respond to my older self. The post is called Overwhelmed by the Complexity of Reality. So I'm going to read it to you and tell you what went through my head at this time. So I remember that I wrote this while I was traveling with my family in Brazil, and I was thinking a lot about how many things exist in reality, and I was overwhelmed by the sheer quantity that my mind could think about. So the post reads, overwhelmed by the complexity of reality. A lot of times I get overwhelmed by how complex reality is. There are so many concepts, words, emotions, life events, history, inventions, complex systems, etc. We got used to life and are half aware that reality is complicated, but we can't fathom or begin to understand the true amount of it. How completely incapable we are to imagine how much is and has been. Imagine being an omniscient being. Okay, I'm going to make a break here. I know that the feeling that I had at this time was as if I wanted to merge with everything and I wanted to understand everything. And the contrast between my own personal existence and the infinitude of reality caused this huge yearning to completeness. Like there was this emptiness inside, and it understood that there are a lot of different dualities, meaning different objects in existence. So I want to merge somehow these objects in existence together as one. And the inability to do so caused this existential frustration or overwhelm by how many aspects of existence are real. So then I started to list these. So it continues. Okay, so being omniscient would mean that you know every little atom, the position of this atom and every interaction it had, the velocity, its nature, everything that has ever happened in all time and space at a microscopic level, every thought that every human ever had, when and why he had it, what feeling he associated with each and every one of them, and how long he remembered them, every word ever spoken, the history of each, and the intent it could have. All that has been forgotten, when and why, and by whom it has been forgotten. The exact name of every color in existence, in every language, in the unconscious association that has been had by seeing certain color. Every chess, soccer, video game, or song ever played, the history behind them and everything it entails. You could take whatever concept or specific thing you like and go endlessly into detail about it. So this is interesting because I am not going into detail about it, right? I'm just naming things that exist. And it makes me empathize with how much I was struggling existentially at the time, because what is the point of this post? Like, if you take a sober look at this post, it is kind of madness, because here I am there I was trying to imagine omniscience or what knowledge is, and then wanting to build a picture of the infinitude of knowledge, and then just naming random things as if I'm making even a dent into the overall amount of things I could name. What are you going to do next? Say everything that is in the dictionary in every language? And even then, you would not even come close to how many sensations exist. This is even still very much in the realm of language. Then, if you really take the complexity to heart, you can combine everything together and, yeah, make a ton of recipes of experiences that you can have in life. The infinitude of experience becomes very lived when you start to notice how much is actually clashing together in each moment for you. So right now there are so many aspects of your experience clashing together, and the likelihood of it being exactly the way that it is right now and you being you is so infinitely small that it is a miracle that you are alive at all. But let me continue. There seems to be an infinite amount of things that have happened and are happening every day that most regard as unimportant. And for us, most probably they are. But I sometimes can't stop to be stunned by the complexity of it all. But then again, is complexity valuable in itself? Or is it just my subjective human experience that attributes value to it? Probably the latter, which is in itself baffling to me. The fact that I'm able to think and feel any of this, feel like this. It's funny because I can see myself being so fascinated by all of the complexity of existence, and then in the same breath being like, why does any of this even matter? Does it matter that there's so much complexity in life? Do the things that I've named have any inherent value or some inherent existence? And then questioning if there is really the sense of importance to it, right? Or am I just being crazy? But then even if I am being crazy, the possibility that I can even be crazy about such a thing is in itself marvelous. And then I used to spiral in this way. But it's actually not crazy. I think it is coming into deeper contact with the nature of reality in of itself. When we have a normal human life, we just do normal human things and don't think about the existence as a whole or how weird it is that any of this is real. And then if you kind of have had some intense existential experience, maybe a traumatic experience like somebody died, or you had a psychedelic experience, or you meditate a lot, or have some other weird shamanic ritual in your pocket, then it becomes quite easy to notice that time truly is relative. The self does not exist. And qualia, the sensation of something being, like the sensation of breathing or the sensation of depth vision. I could also make an infinite list about qualia now. But the qualia in of itself is the magic of life. And when I talk about every chess, soccer, or video game or song ever played, I'm actually not talking about the word label. I'm talking about the experience that is being represented by that word. And there you can go in depth instead of staying on the superficial layer. So I talk about every chess game ever played, or every soccer or video game ever played. Well, just taking chess, there are infinite numbers of chess games that can be played. There are more chess games or more chess positions than there are atoms in the universe. And it's very difficult to grasp that if you don't understand the math behind it, but that's just how logarithmic scales work. And this is why you can have so much fascination with just one game, right? You have fascination about what chess is. But what I'm doing in this post, it's very superficial actually, because I'm not going into depth with any of it. I'm just overwhelmed by trying to pick apart different dualities that exist in reality and then being like, wow, isn't it incredible? But there's like no depth really there. There's just width. And if you go wide, then you become overwhelmed because you're not focused in your attention to something specific you want to do or that you can actually grapple with. Because, like we just established, even chess in of itself is such a complex thing that exists that you can dedicate your entire life to it. But if you are overwhelmed by chess alone, then how are you going to deal with your life? At this point, I had, I think, my first very intense psychedelic experience the year before, or the same year, or earlier the same year. And it very much changed how I perceive existence as a whole. And before this post, I was already very, very existentially oriented and very philosophical. But I remember that this post was the product of trying to integrate these philosophical thoughts as something that means something. Because once you have these existential experiences, you cannot kind of unsee it anymore. It's more difficult to pretend that this world is normal, that time and space is normal, that human biology is normal, that, anything is normal, really. And when this veil gets lost in perception, it becomes difficult to just accept ordinary things in life. And this is where most of the struggle that I had came from. I just couldn't accept the most ordinary things in my life. Everything became a meta-narrative, and every meta-narrative came with some philosophical thought that tried to make sense out of these meta-narratives. And it wasn't very functional, because I was very smart and then I could think about these things, but they never produced real results in my life that I could actually apply. It was always paralyzing overwhelm. I'm reminded that as a kid, I wanted to be God. Talking about hubris, I remember that this distinct moment was when I was 7 years old in the shower. I thought about how awesome it would be to just control all of reality and to merge with it. And I was a little kid back then, and I still had this like yearning for like completeness. And when I grew older, there were a lot of like fantasies of like some fantasy worlds that I could have complete power and control over. And it's kind of like this ego coming online, wanting to control reality and control things, which is not really possible in that way. But then when I got older, I remember crying in my bed too with the same yearning, the same seeking for oneness. And this post is a kind of the symptom of the opposite. Instead of oneness, what I'm struggling with here is this obsession with duality, this obsession with separation. And if you want to make if you want to have a very trippy experience, which I don't know if I would recommend, but if you meditate on duality, it can be very uncomfortable. If you focus on how many distinct experiences exist in your awareness, and you kind of note them mentally, each single one, like, okay, I have fingers, I can feel my fingers, I can feel the breath, I can actually feel my nose, I can see the vision in my left eye, I can see this light and this fly, and you notice how quickly they pass and come together. And then you start to notice how awareness is almost like this movie, this movie that picks and chooses what to focus on, but everything that is in awareness that you're not focusing on is also still happening because it's in your awareness. And what attention does is that it tends, through the ego or through your sense of identity, focus on your thoughts. It's this focusing on your thoughts that causes the sense of I am my thoughts. And this I am my thoughts tries to kind of resolve into unity by thinking more through philosophy. And this doesn't work. Because if you are your thoughts, then think about how many things you are not. You're now stuck in your thoughts, which is the average human experience. And it's not comfortable. It's actively miserable when you notice the quality or the nature of thought. Thoughts can be pleasant, thoughts can be productive, but for most people, they just narrate a story the same way they narrate this abstract reality where there are infinite dualities. But I'm never going to get closer to these dualities by thinking about them. I'm constructing a new sort of duality through this post. By posting this, I am creating almost imaginary complexity through language. But what actually the language is trying to point to has nothing to do with the words that I'm using here. A chess match is not the word. These words are just symbols to represent something way more profound. And the profundity can only be lived through experience, to actually living through it, not by thinking about it. So the merging of duality in your awareness is done by not thinking so much about it. The overwhelm comes from the thinking. There is no overwhelm there, and then you think yourself into an overwhelming sense of reality because the mind tries to grasp reality, which is not possible. You cannot contain something infinite. Okay, looking at some comments. Recently at a concert, I had an epiphany, and I believe now that the meaning of life is that complexity. I think that the meaning of life is assigning more details and more names and getting more and more specific in approach of everything eventually being created. We'll never get there, like the line that cruises near parallel to the y-axis but never touches it. Complexity is what the universe naturally evolves towards. This is why we are creating more and more experiences over the history of our species or of Earth generally. It's like that the universe is some sort of explorer of complexity. It happens in evolution, where different species evolve and become different forms of being expressing themselves. And you can see it in the way we express ourselves through art. There's never enough art for us. There's never enough expression for us. And we are fascinated by the complexity of it all. We keep exploring the complexity because it seems like this is the natural nature of the universe. The interesting thing about complexity is that complexity comes through duality. The separation from one object to another is what creates complexity. If there was no complexity, then there was no atoms that could form any sort of material. It's in the complexity that you can see the duality of it all. And the difficult thing that the mind tries to wrap its head around, actually, or what the mind actually is looking for, is non-duality. It is stopping all of these separations and seeing that all of it is one. The overwhelm comes from trying to understand everything into further complexity, which isn't possible. You cannot wrap your head around infinitude. But the present moment of experience is an expression of infinity. And if you settle yourself into awareness and stop thinking so much, you can start to notice that all of this complexity is actually very simple. When you turn off the mind and experience your awareness for what it is without narrating it or making it into a story, then everything appears just as it is. Reality is exactly what you're experiencing. Truth is exactly what you're experiencing. This trying to understand duality or non-duality or awareness or trying to separate yourself from it or trying to understand it, it is always creating more dualities. But if you stop thinking and start experiencing and become one with the experience, then life suddenly becomes very simple and your experience becomes very simple. It's like you understand everything, always. This is omniscience. Omniscience is present moment experience. In each moment in time and space, you know everything that is possible for you to know. Your experience right now is knowing itself completely. There's nothing that you don't know by being what you are. You might say that true omniscience would be that you are all experience of all reality all the time, and then you're truly omniscient. Well, first, maybe this is what happens after death. Maybe then you actually merge with some sort of godhead and you become truly omniscient. But I'd argue that even if that's the case, then you are part of God's omniscience. Because how could it know how it's like to not know everything? It's a paradox. True omniscience would include the ability to not know something. Like the lack of knowledge is also part of the experience. If you don't know the end of a book, then what you do know is how it is like to experience your life without knowing the end of the book. I'm using the book as a very generic example, but I want you to observe how the lack of knowledge is kind of knowledge itself, because it knows how the experience of not knowing is like. And this is the paradox of omniscience. So you kind of need limitations even around omniscience to be truly omniscient. It's very odd, but if you take what I'm saying here seriously and not just as philosophy and try to apply it to your present moment awareness right now, you can actually enter a shift in perception that is real and felt. And what the shift will tell you is that truth is knowable beyond the intellect, beyond the mind. And the experience of this will not feel like complexity. It will feel like simplification. It will feel like clarity. It crystallizes your life into something grounding and present. Another comment. While I love and encourage another comment. While I love and encourage philosophical thought, the best course of action for the time being may be to distract yourself with things you enjoy. Very wise comment, very wise. But on this channel, we love philosophy, am I right? And what if the contemplation of the splendor of the complexity is the very thing you enjoy? Surely distraction is only part of our experience as living beings. Exactly, that's what I mean. Embrace philosophy. I love philosophy. I would never hate on philosophy. Okay, so the moderator says, of course. However, if you're so overwhelmed by it as the original poster seemed to be, then I think that to relax and enjoy life for a day or so, not thinking about it would be wise. I agree. Not thinking about it would be wise. go back to my past time self, to my past self, and tell it to him. He was not well. He was not well thinking about it. Deleted user writes, I subscribe to the Hindu notion that everything is God. Only he has disguised himself, hidden his being from himself in order to experience the self as whole, referring to the entirety of the universe in relation to the self incarnate, in, for example, a human being, though any living being has consciousness and as such qualifies. Exactly, this is the idea that at the end it's all one, which is the idea of being synonymous to God. The reason this is scary, though, is that if you think about this as a philosophy, then it's kind of neat, right? Oh, cool, I'm kind of like God, or we are all God, or whatever. But if you experience it in your life directly, then it's scary, because then the ego is confronted with his own death. There are also cases, which is very common, is that the ego actually adopts the identity. Oh, I am God. And then you have delusions of grandeur where you think you're literally the equivalent of an all-powerful God, which there's a difficulty here because on one sense, if you take this seriously, then you literally are God because you're one with it. You are part of the cause and effect chain from all this complexity. Like all this complexity is not separated from you. Everything that had brought this complexity into this current configuration is you. It's identical. So then there's no distinction between you or the entirety of the universe. But then if you have a sense of identity or like an ego that then makes it personal, then you have this idea of I am God that is very toxic and unhelpful, and it becomes delusional. But still, even without this mental narrative of I am God, the experience of oneness with reality still feels like, oh, I am merging with Godhood. And this is very, very uncomfortable. This is how ego death can often feel like, or how ego death often gets interpreted. I would describe it as if normally when you have qualia, like you have sensations, the breath or the vision field, the experience that we normally have is that the vision is out there, and then through our eyes and our perception, it's like we suck it in. Like the qualia comes from outside into our perceptual field. But in an ego death experience, it feels like this order is being reversed. Instead of you experiencing external stimulation and sucking it in, you're getting sucked into the external stimuli. So then you become identical to the wall, identical to the vision, identical to whatever the fuck. This is where the ego death feeling comes from, because now you cannot orient yourself, because now you're not a being anymore that looks from outside in, but you feel like you're getting sucked into the outside reality. And this feels like a merging with absolute reality, absolute objectivity. And then you start to see that any experience is identical to absolute reality. Or this is at least how the experience is like. And I'm not talking about the content of experience. Like I'm not talking about the ideas of it. Just because you imagine that you're a dragon, because you're high as a kite, doesn't mean that you're actually a dragon, right? This is absurd. But if you start to merge with the wall and you feel like I am the wall, what you start to see is that your perception of the wall is identical to who you are. And it's only the ego that causes the sense of separation. Through meditation and introspection and trauma healing, this happens also in normal day-to-day life. And this is where the path towards self-realization or finding your higher self also leads you to this place of, whoa, my lights turned off. Ha, we're back online, bitch. And it's about finding peace with the reality that yeah, you actually are the qualia around you. You are the awareness around you. You're not the thing behind the eyes. And then experiencing this, that you are not whatever's behind your eyes, can become very scary. And there's where you create all of these meta narratives about being God or being one with God or being reality or everything's subjective or everything's determined or I don't exist. But these are again thoughts that try to create solidity around an experience that has no solidity at all. 2001 boy writes, Happy Existential Wednesday. I definitely woke up with this exact thought process earlier. It is truly horrible. Oh, I'm sorry you feel that way. But it's not Wednesday, it's Monday. Good to see some appreciation for creation in an age of malice. I'm glad that this person saw the appreciation in the marveling of existence. Yes, it's absolutely awe-inspiring. How lucky are we to get the tiniest slice of it? Consciousness truly is amazing. D to that. Yes, once you remove your mind from all this overwhelm, it is really amazing. Joseph Reaper writes, You're not overwhelmed by the complexity of reality, you're overwhelmed by the complexity of your reaction to it. All of these concepts are nothing but words that you assign a mental image to. They exist nowhere but your mind. Reality is atoms, a pack of magical space dots that appear for no reason, disappear and get forgotten. It is completely insufficient for the human mind, and your need for it to at least match the depth of the inner states you are capable of feeling results in an excessive mental state that is desperately trying to fill its own inner void. Yes, this seems about accurate. It's that the mind is so insufficient in comparison to all of reality that you kind of want to feel the depth of reality internally. You want to experience how deep reality is as your day-to-day life. But your day-to-day life often feels very empty or boring or dull. And from this dullness comes this need to kind of understand it all and become it all and merge with it all. And in some sense, it's actually possible. but by the reverse process, not by thinking more, but by thinking less or resolving the tensions that you have in your body that makes you think so much. Islam is the answer to all this. Ignore comments that say distract yourself. Islam teaches the opposite. No thanks. I do think that all of these religions point to the same core truth here. All of them want to unite reality in one framework of, oneness in a sense. Just that all religions, and I used to be very Christian, all religions make God into another personhood instead of, nothingness or the void or the universe. I mean, you can also call it awareness or consciousness, where it then becomes more similar to like a being. But the entire rule hierarchy that then religions have invented in the Bible or in the Quran, it's all about control, right? It's all about trying to control us as people and then trying to make us do what we want because we have the High Lord in our power. It's actually the smartest way to create power over other people because, now you're not talking from yourself. You're talking about the highest authority, which there is no highest authority except yourself. I started to write more structured essays on Substack, so check that out if you liked it. And if you want to deep understand what spirituality is and my framework and how I make it understandable, then check this video out next.